Trust isn't something you lose all at once. It's like watching your house get torn apart one wall at a time, and you're the one who handed over the keys. You think you're building something together, but really you're just funding your own demolition. The worst part isn't losing the money. It's realizing that every "I love you" came with a price tag you never saw coming. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by a longtime subscriber who asked to remain anonymous. He said if sharing his experience could help even one person avoid his mistakes, then maybe losing everything would mean something. I met Rosalind on an international dating site during COVID lockdown. I was 62, recently divorced and spending too much time alone in my Portland apartment. She was 34, living in Cebu City with her 8-year-old daughter, working odd jobs to survive. Our first video call lasted 4 hours. "Marcus," she said, her English soft but clear, "I never meet American man who listen like you do." Something about the way she smiled made my chest tight. I hadn't felt needed in years. For 2 years we talked every day. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to catch her evening in the Philippines. "Good morning, my love," she'd whisper, and I'd forget I was eating dinner alone again. She told me about her struggles, the daughter's school fees, her sick mother, the tiny apartment they shared with 3 other families. "I dream of quiet house," she said one night, tears in her eyes. "Place where Maria can study without noise." I started sending money. Small amounts at first, $200 for school supplies, $500 for her mother's medicine. Each time Rosalind cried with gratitude, "You are angel, Marcus. God send you to save us." When I told her I was retiring early and could live anywhere, her face lit up. "Come here," she pleaded. "We build life together." The idea excited me more than I expected. What was keeping me in Portland? My ex-wife had taken half my assets, my kids were grown and barely called, and I had enough savings to live comfortably in Southeast Asia. "But where would we live?" I asked. Rosalind's smile was radiant. "We find place. Make our home together." That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I found a 3-bedroom house in a decent neighborhood outside Cebu City. $85,000 for something that would cost $400,000 in Portland. The photos showed a modest but solid structure, with a small garden and room to grow. When I showed Rosalind during our video call, she started crying. "This is for us," she whispered. "Really?" I nodded, my heart swelling with purpose. "For our family. For Maria's future." She was quiet for a long moment, then looked directly at the camera. "Marcus, this is our house, yes? Not just yours?" The question caught me off guard, but her vulnerability was heartbreaking. "Of course it's ours," I said. "We're building this together." The paperwork was complex, but Rosalind helped navigate the Philippine bureaucracy. She insisted both our names go on the deed. "This way it's truly our house," she explained. "Show me you trust me like I trust you." It made sense. We were partners now. I wired the money and booked my flight, excited to finally hold the woman who'd given me hope again. The house was smaller than the photos suggested, but it had good bones. Rosalind met me at the airport with Maria, and seeing them together in person felt surreal. That first night, as we sat in our living room, Rosalind took my hand. "Our house," she said softly. "Finally, we have home." I believed her completely. For the first 3 months, we were happy. I loved the routine of Philippine life. The morning coffee together, helping Maria with homework, weekend trips to the market. Rosalind was affectionate and attentive, always checking if I needed anything. "You happy here with me?" she'd ask, and I always was. The house felt like home in a way my Portland apartment never did. Then Rosalind mentioned her Uncle Ernesto. "He very good with construction," she said one morning, pointing to a water stain on the bathroom ceiling. "Maybe he look at this problem for us?" I agreed immediately. It was a small favor for her family, and I wanted to support the people who mattered to her. "He give us good price because we family now," Rosalind said, squeezing my arm. Ernesto arrived the next day with 2 other men I didn't recognize. He was older than I expected, maybe 55, with calloused hands and a serious expression. He examined the bathroom ceiling briefly, then shook his head gravely. Rosalind translated their rapid Bisaya conversation. "I say this very bad," she told me, her face concerned. "Water damage go deep. Need fix everything before it spread to other rooms." I couldn't see extensive damage, but I wasn't a construction expert. How much? I asked. Roslyn spoke with Ernesto again. He say $2,000, but because we family, only $1,500. It seemed reasonable for a full bathroom renovation. The work began immediately. At 6 a.m. the next morning, I was jolted awake by drilling and hammering. When I stumbled out to check the progress, Ernesto's crew was tearing apart not just the ceiling, but the entire bathroom. "Is this all necessary?" I asked Roslyn, who was making coffee in the kitchen. She nodded seriously. "Uncle Ernesto say if we not fix everything now, whole house could have problems later. Better do right first time." I wanted to inspect the work myself, but Ernesto waved me away when I approached. Roslyn explained that in Filipino culture, questioning a craftsman's expertise was deeply insulting. "He know what he doing," she assured me. "Trust me, please." What bothered me more was the pace. Ernesto's crew seemed to spend as much time sitting around drinking beer as actually working. When I mentioned this to Roslyn, she looked hurt. "This is how Filipino workers are," she said. "They take breaks, but work get done. Why you worry so much?" I felt guilty for questioning her family's work ethic. Maybe I was being too much of an uptight American. A week into the bathroom project, Ernesto approached me with Roslyn translating. The kitchen, he claimed, had similar water damage. "He say the pipes under kitchen also very old," Roslyn explained. "Could break any time and flood whole house." I hadn't noticed any problems with the kitchen, but I was starting to doubt my own judgment. "How much more?" I asked. Another conversation in Bisaya, then Roslyn turned to me with apologetic eyes. "Another $3,000, but he do both jobs together for $5,000 total. Save us money." This is where my engineering background should have kicked in. I'd spent 35 years designing electrical systems. I understood construction. But when I tried to examine Ernesto's work more closely, asking about building codes and structural requirements, Roslyn became defensive. "Why you not trust my family?" she asked, tears forming in her eyes. "In Philippines, we have different way of building. Uncle Ernesto know Philippine codes, not American codes." She was right about the building standards being different, and I didn't want to insult her uncle's expertise. The real turning point came when I suggested buying higher quality materials. The pipes and fixtures Ernesto was using looked suspiciously cheap. "Maybe we should invest in better materials that will last longer," I said. Roslyn's reaction was explosive. She started crying, accusing me of treating her family like they were trying to cheat us. "I thought this was our house," she sobbed. "But you act like I'm stranger. Like I cannot make decisions about our home." Her pain seemed genuine, and I felt terrible for making her feel excluded. "Of course it's our house," I said, holding her close. "I just want what's best for us." "Then trust me," she whispered against my chest. "Trust my family. We want good house too." I agreed to let Ernesto handle all the material choices. Roslyn wiped her tears and smiled. "You get everything at family discount. We save so much money this way." But the bills kept coming. Every few days, Ernesto would present new receipts, handwritten notes in Tagalog that Roslyn would translate vaguely. "Unexpected complications," she'd explain, "or premium materials cost more but last longer." After 3 weeks, I realized I'd already spent $15,000 on what should have been a $3,000 bathroom repair. When I asked to see itemized receipts in English, Ernesto produced a collection of handwritten papers that meant nothing to me. "This is how business done in Philippines," Roslyn explained. "Very different from America. More trust, less paperwork." I noticed expensive-looking power tools appearing around the job site, equipment that seemed excessive for a simple renovation. When I mentioned this, Roslyn's eyes flashed with hurt. "You think my uncle's stealing from us?" she asked. "Maybe you get second opinion if you not trust family." The moment I suggested bringing in another contractor for a second estimate, Roslyn became hysterical. "You insult my family," she screamed. "After everything they do for us, you accuse them of cheating." She locked herself in our bedroom, refusing to come out for meals. Maria looked at me with confused, sad eyes. "Why Mama crying?" she asked in her limited English. I felt like the worst kind of person, the paranoid foreigner who couldn't appreciate Filipino generosity. After 2 days of Roslyn's silent treatment, I paid Ernesto another $8,000, hoping it would end the project and restore peace in our house. Roslyn emerged from the bedroom that evening with red eyes but a grateful smile. "Thank you for trusting us," she said softly. "I know this hard for you, but we almost finished now." But we weren't finished. The next week, Rosalind's cousin Joselle arrived from Manila to help coordinate the project. She was younger than Rosalind, maybe late 20s, with a businesslike manner that made me immediately uncomfortable. "The work is very complex," Joselle explained in crisp English. "I help make sure everything done properly." Then Rosalind's brother Ramon showed up, needing a place to stay while he looked for work in Cebu. Suddenly, a modest home renovation had become a full family employment program. I found myself feeding and housing 4 adults plus Maria, while paying for construction materials that arrived daily. The work areas kept expanding. Now they needed to renovate the garage to create proper storage and add a second bathroom for when family visited. "But we already have a bathroom," I protested weakly. Rosalind looked at me with disappointment. "This is our house, yes?" she said. "We need to think about future, about family needs." Every time I tried to set boundaries about the scope or cost, Rosalind would remind me that I'd said this was our house too. How could I make unilateral decisions about our shared home? When I pointed out that my retirement savings were rapidly disappearing, she'd threaten to leave. "Maybe I was wrong about us," she'd say sadly. "Maybe you only want Filipino girlfriend, not Filipino wife with family responsibilities." The threat of losing her terrified me more than losing money. My daily routine became a nightmare of constant construction noise, unexpected expenses, and family meetings conducted in rapid Bisaya that excluded me completely. When I asked what was being discussed, Rosalind would give me vague summaries. They planning next phase of work, or discussing family obligations. I felt like a stranger in my own home, but whenever I tried to assert some control, Rosalind would become tearful about my lack of trust in her family. The breaking point should have come when I calculated that I'd spent $32,000 on renovations that appeared to be worth maybe $5,000 in actual improvements. But the real moment of clarity came when I overheard Ernesto talking on his phone in English, better English than he'd ever used with me. He was discussing selling building materials to another job site. "Yeah, the American buying premium price for everything," he laughed. "Easy money." When I confronted him about this conversation, Ernesto's face didn't change. "Misunderstanding," he said simply. "I was talking about different job, but I knew what I'd heard. I demanded to inspect all the completed work, really examine what I'd been paying for. What I found made my stomach sick. Most of the renovations were cosmetic covering. Fresh paint over water-damaged walls, new fixtures attached to old, faulty plumbing that hadn't been replaced. The electrical work I'd paid thousands for was superficial rewiring that didn't address the fundamental problems I could now see clearly. I confronted Rosalind that evening, presenting the evidence of shoddy work and overcharging. She immediately broke down crying, claiming her family had taken advantage of her trust too. "I'm so sorry, Marcus," she sobbed. "I thought they doing good job for us. I not know they cheating." She begged me not to abandon her, insisting she'd had no idea about the scam. "Please don't leave me," she pleaded. "We fix this together. Send them away and do properly." I wanted desperately to believe her. The alternative, that the woman I loved had orchestrated my financial destruction, was too painful to accept. But the evidence was overwhelming. The conversations between family members that excluded me, the inflated bills, the constant expansion of work scope, the materials being resold elsewhere. Either Rosalind was complicit, or she was the most naive person in the Philippines. When I threatened to stop all payments and demand an accounting of expenses, Rosalind's entire family turned against me. They claimed I owed money for completed work and threatened legal action if I didn't pay. Joselle produced documents in Tagalog that supposedly proved I'd approved all the work. "You signed," she said coldly, showing me papers I remembered signing but had never been translated. Philippine law very clear about contractor agreements. That's when I learned my first hard lesson about foreign property ownership. While my name was on the property deed, Philippine law strongly favored Filipino citizens in disputes with foreigners. The lawyer I secretly consulted was blunt. "You have very few rights here," he said. "As a foreigner, the courts will assume you're trying to cheat Filipinos, not the other way around. Your best option is negotiating a settlement and leaving quickly." But leaving wasn't simple anymore. Rosalind began limiting my access to shared spaces in the house, saying the family needed privacy to finish their work properly. I found myself confined to the master bedroom while construction noise filled the house 12 hours a day. My meals arrived late and cold, served by Maria with apologetic looks that suggested she understood more about the situation than anyone admitted. When I tried to leave the house for longer than a few hours, Joselle would follow me, claiming it was for my security. The isolation was subtle but effective. Phone calls to friends back home became impossible due to constant interruptions. Rosalind alternated between tearful apologies and cold indifference, keeping me emotionally off balance and unable to think clearly about my situation. The final betrayal came when I discovered Rosalind showing the house to potential renters. I overheard her explaining to a young couple that the property would be available for lease soon. When I confronted her, she didn't even try to deny it. "The family need income while you go back to America to earn more money for our future," she said matter-of-factly. The renovation, she explained, was never about improving our home. It was about increasing the rental value at my expense. "But I thought we were building this together," I said, feeling like a child who just learned Santa wasn't real. Rosalind looked at me with something that might have been pity. "We are building together," she said. "I build security for my family. You build experience about Philippines." She still claimed to love me, but I needed to be practical about our financial situation. I was 62 years old, she pointed out, and she was 34 with a daughter to raise. Did I really think she could depend on me forever? That night, I finally understood that every conversation, every tear, every intimate moment had been calculated to keep me investing, while her family positioned themselves to take control of my property. The renovation was just the mechanism. The real scam was making me believe someone genuinely needed and loved me. I tried to pack my belongings the next morning, planning to cut my losses and return to Portland. That's when I discovered my passport was missing from the dresser drawer where I'd kept it since arriving. Rosalind claimed it must have been misplaced during the renovation chaos, but I knew better. Without my passport, I couldn't leave the Philippines. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making. The U.S. Embassy could help, but only if I could prove coercion or theft. The family had been careful to make everything appear voluntary. I'd signed documents, paid bills, made decisions freely. The fact that I couldn't read the documents or understand the conversations didn't matter legally. I was the wealthy American who'd chosen to trust Filipinos. Any problems were my own fault. It took 3 weeks and embassy pressure to recover my passport. During that time, I lived in a kind of house arrest, watching the family prepare the property for rental, while treating me like an unwelcome guest. The construction was suddenly finished, all the work completed properly once they no longer needed to extract money from me. The house looked beautiful, definitely worth the rental income it would generate for years to come. My final confrontation with the family was almost anticlimactic. I demanded my passport and threatened to involve Philippine authorities in investigating fraud. Ernesto just laughed, showing me receipts that proved I'd voluntarily paid for everything. "American man always think Filipinos trying to cheat them," he said. "But you paid gladly. We have papers to prove." Rosalind had stopped pretending entirely by then. "You were naive to think a young Filipino woman would love an old American for anything besides money," she told me with brutal honesty. "The house renovation gave my family legitimate income, while teaching you valuable lesson about cross-cultural relationships." She wasn't angry or cruel about it, just matter of fact. This was how the world worked. I'd been useful, and now I wasn't. The emotional betrayal hurt more than the financial loss, though both were devastating. Sitting in a budget hotel near the airport, I calculated what 2 years of believing in love had cost me. The house purchase, the renovation bills, the family support, the living expenses. Nearly $120,000 of my retirement savings was gone. At 62, with limited job prospects and no pension, I was facing financial disaster. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing that everything I'd felt, the connection, the intimacy, the hope for a different kind of life, had been performance. Every "I love you" had been calculated. Every tear had been strategic. Every moment of apparent vulnerability had been manipulation. Friends and family back home had warned me about online relationships with younger foreign women, but I'd been convinced my situation was different. Rosalind seemed genuine, not like the stereotypical gold digger. She'd never directly asked for money, just shared her struggles and accepted my help gratefully. The house purchase felt like a mutual investment in our future, not a con game. I'd been proud of my ability to read people, confident in my judgment about character. Learning how completely I'd been fooled was humiliating. At the airport, waiting for my flight back to Portland, I reflected on how easily I'd been manipulated, once Roslyn established emotional control over me. The house renovation was just the delivery method. The real scam was convincing me that someone half my age genuinely needed and loved me. Every family crisis, every renovation emergency, every tearful conversation about our future had been designed to keep me emotionally invested while steadily draining my resources. I understood now that loneliness had made me vulnerable to manipulation. My divorce had left me feeling unwanted and disposable. Meeting someone who seemed to value my company, who appreciated my stability and maturity, who made me feel needed again, it was intoxicating. I'd ignored obvious warning signs that friends back home would have spotted immediately, because I wanted so desperately to believe in the fantasy. The flight to Portland gave me 13 hours to process what had happened and what came next. I was returning to America with almost nothing. A small apartment I'd kept for tax purposes, some remaining savings, and no clear plan for rebuilding my life at 62. The house in Cebu would generate rental income for Roslyn's family exactly as they'd planned, probably for decades to come. I also had to face the people who'd tried to warn me. My sister had been skeptical from the beginning. A 34-year-old single mother doesn't fall in love with a 60-year-old retired engineer, she'd said during one of our arguments. She falls in love with his bank account. My adult children had been politely concerned about my Philippine adventure, suggesting I visit first before making any major investments. Even my divorce attorney had warned me about protecting my assets during a major life transition. I'd dismissed all their concerns as jealousy or narrow-mindedness. Back in Portland, I moved into a studio apartment and took a part-time consulting job to stretch my remaining savings. The contrast with my Philippine lifestyle was stark. No warm weather, no attentive partner, no sense of being needed or appreciated, just the reality of being an aging man starting over, with limited resources and damaged trust. I made the mistake of checking Roslyn's social media accounts one evening, discovering posts about the house renovation project. She'd rebranded the experience as a family business success story, showcasing before and after photos of the property. The house looked genuinely beautiful. Professional staging, modern fixtures, appealing to the growing market of digital nomads and expat retirees looking for affordable Philippine real estate. In the photos, Roslyn appeared happy and successful, surrounded by her family and their profitable investment property. The most painful part was seeing that it had never been about love at all. This was a family business and I'd been the customer. The relationship, the emotional intimacy, the shared dreams, all of it had been product design carefully crafted to extract maximum value from a lonely, vulnerable target. I wasn't the first American to fund their renovation projects, and I certainly wouldn't be the last. But gradually, I began to understand the larger pattern of what had happened to me. I started volunteering with organizations that help prevent elder financial abuse, sharing my story as a warning to other men considering similar international relationships. The stories I heard were depressingly familiar. Lonely older men, recently divorced or widowed seeking connection and purpose in relationships with much younger foreign women. The specific scams varied, but the emotional manipulation was almost identical. Through this work, I learned that genuine relationships don't require constant financial proof. Real partners don't isolate you from your support systems or make you feel guilty for asking reasonable questions about shared expenses. Love doesn't demand that you surrender your judgment or ignore obvious red flags to prove your commitment. I also learned to recognize the warning signs I'd missed. The immediate declaration of love, the rapid escalation of intimacy, the constant financial crises that required my help, the family obligations that became my responsibilities, the way questioning any aspect of the relationship was treated as betrayal. All classic patterns of romantic fraud designed to exploit emotional vulnerability. Most importantly, I learned that the most expensive renovations aren't to buildings. They're to your ability to trust again. 2 years later, I still struggle with intimate relationships. Every expression of interest from a potential partner triggers suspicion about hidden motives. Every request for help or support makes me wonder if I'm being played again. The financial loss was devastating, but the emotional damage runs deeper. I sometimes wonder how many other lonely expats are currently funding similar renovation projects around the world. Roslyn wasn't uniquely evil. She was running a family business in a country where survival often requires exploiting whatever advantages you can find. From her perspective, I was a wealthy foreigner who could afford to lose money I'd never really earned, just inherited from decades of American economic privilege. The fact that it represented my entire retirement security wasn't her concern, but understanding the economic logic doesn't make the betrayal hurt less. I genuinely cared about Roslyn and Maria. I was excited about building a life in the Philippines, contributing to a community, being part of something larger than myself, learning that none of it was real, that every moment of connection was performance designed to extract money from me, left me questioning my judgment about everything. The house still generates rental income for Roslyn's family. According to the property listings I occasionally torture myself by checking, it's quite popular with expat renters who appreciate the modern renovations and family-friendly neighborhood. The irony isn't lost on me that my financial destruction created exactly the kind of comfortable, updated home that other foreigners are happy to pay premium rates to enjoy. These days I'm rebuilding slowly. The part-time consulting work has become steady income. I've made a few new friends through the volunteer work, people who understand the complexities of starting over later in life. I'm learning to be alone without being lonely, to find purpose that doesn't depend on being needed by someone else. I keep Roslyn blocked on all social media platforms, but sometimes I wonder if she ever thinks about the human cost of what her family did. Does she remember any of our conversations as genuine moments, or was it all just professional performance from the beginning? Does Maria remember the American man who helped with her homework and took her to the park, or am I just a forgotten chapter in their family's business operations? But mostly I try to focus on the future instead of the past. I'm 64 now, still healthy, still capable of building something meaningful with the years I have left. The difference is that now I understand the real cost of trust. It's not something to be given easily or cheaply. Real love doesn't require constant financial sacrifice to prove itself. Real partners want to protect your security, not exploit your vulnerabilities. If sharing this story helps even one person recognize the warning signs I missed, then maybe losing everything will have served some purpose. The most expensive lesson of my life was learning that some houses aren't worth renovating, and some relationships are just construction projects designed to build someone else's future on the foundation of your destroyed dreams. Trust isn't something you lose all at once, but once it's gone, rebuilding it takes longer than any renovation project and costs more than any house.